Now, when we refer to Haiti, the country is often in the news for all the wrong reasons: abject poverty, natural disasters, or even a president who was gunned down while asleep. Now, the New York Times has published an investigation on what could be at the heart of Haiti's misery. Reparations the country had to pay to its enslavers. In 1791, the largest slave uprising in history occurred in Haiti. 21 years after the country's independence from France, a French warship accompanied by two other ships sailed into Port-au-Prince and gave Haiti an ultimatum. We can now bring in one of the journalists who worked on the piece for a year, Méheut. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Tell us what happened in 1825 and what was the ultimatum France gave Haiti.
So in 1825, which is 2 decades after Haiti won its independence on the battlefield, beating Napoleon's forces, the French came back with a fleet of warships and told Haiti, basically, you have to pay us an astounding amount of money in reparations to the former French slaveholders, or we will actually make war again, right? Haiti was in a very difficult position. Haiti had not been recognized as an independent country by the US and by many other Western countries. It desperately needed to reestablish trade links with the Western world, and also there were those warships, off the coast. So after 3 days of negotiations, Haiti agreed to pay 150 million francs to the former French slaveholders. Just to put things in perspective, 150 million francs represented about 3 times Haiti's GDP at the time. So this is a huge debt for the country. What happened after that was that the debt was renegotiated down in 1838 to 90 million francs and paid year after year until 1888. But to do so, Haiti had to contract a loan to cover just even the first payment, which represented about 6 times its revenues in 1825. So that really set Haiti on the course of independence for decades to come.
And where did Haiti get this money from? Because they didn't have 150 million francs, no, 90 million francs sitting in Haiti. So where did it get the money from?
So they got the money from French banks. That is what happened with a first loan in 1825, in which French banks basically gave Haiti 30 million francs. There were bondholders in France that bought some bonds. And that is what became known as the double debt, meaning the indemnity that they paid to the French slaveholders, former French slaveholders, and the debt with the French banks. And that double debt was settled in 1888. But in the meantime, Haiti was also forced to contract new loans in the 1870s to finish, hoping to finish paying off the double debt. So that actually just helped plunge Haiti into a new cycle of indebtedness that actually lasted well into the 20th century.